This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. And by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Learn more and download yours at takecontrolbooks.com. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have two guests from the Mac Observer, but not just from the Mac Observer, but from the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast. We'll talk about that in a minute and why they're here and why I'm sort of trying to borderline hijack their show. So first up, let's get this done. Mr. Jeff Gamet. Jeff, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, and thank you. It's always awesome to get to hang out with you, Chuck. It's like a party.
Well, it is. It's always a party when you show up.
And more so because you were here. So between us, watch out, people.
Yeah.
It's party time.
Really. And also joining him, also from the Mac Observer, Mr. John Martellaro. John, it's great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Jeff's right. It's always a party. We love this show.
Yeah, and the third member that we were hoping to have with us tonight, Kelly Gamet, is wrapped up in App Camp for Girls, and so she couldn't join us for this, but she's here in spirit, right? So
she is, and if you have to miss this show, App Camp for Girls is one of the only acceptable excuses.
Absolutely. They're running. I think this was in Portland, isn't it, Jeff? Again?
Yes,
yeah.
It's important.
So they're doing another one, and it is fantastic. And so she gets a pass and a gold star.
She does.
Jeff, I want to go to you first because I want you to explain the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast, what it is, its genesis, what you do, and all that with it before we get into tonight's topic.
All right. So the idea is to have a short show, something that people can listen to fairly quickly. So we try and keep it around 15-ish minutes. And the genesis for this was that every day we have a meeting with all of our writers. And a lot of times we end up with these really interesting discussions that come out of just chatting. And we were always saying, oh man, we should have recorded that. That would have been a great show. But of course, if you're recording your morning meetings, it completely changes the dynamic. And that spontaneity that can lead to those really interesting discussions probably doesn't happen. So I decided, all right, well, why don't we see the spontaneity and then let's take those ideas and then we'll record the show so that we don't disrupt the meeting, but then people can also get to participate in that part of the discussion where we had really wanted them to be able to be there with us. And so that's the idea behind Daily Observations. So we cover a couple topics, and depending on what I found interesting from the day before or from what's coming up out of our discussions, then I'll decide which of the other people on staff will be with me on the show that day. And really, it is like that. No one knows until I tell them if they're on the show that day.
I like that. So you just surprise them and say, here's a microphone, start talking.
Yeah, pretty much. I just send out a message and say, John, Kelly, you guys are on the show today. And then they know. And
it's short, what, about 15, 17 minutes?
Right.
It seems to be your target time.
Yes.
So it has quickly become one of my daily must listen to, along with
awesome.
Yay.
Well, I'm serious because I can consume it quick, and yet it's thoughtful. There are times I do wish you could get into a little more depth, but that's sort of the beauty of it, that you don't have to dig deep to hit just a couple topics and make it a meaningful discussion. So.
And there have been a couple times at the end of an episode where I lament the fact that the show's not longer. And I'd rather lament that it's not long enough than we're spending too much time. And we've done it once, maybe twice, where I've picked up a topic the next day and carried on with it so that we could talk more.
Yeah, Jeff stops the recording button, and then we yak about something we just talked about.
And then I'm like, gosh, I should have been recording.
Yes.
Yeah, just hit the recording button the second time, just in case, Jeff.
I probably should.
Yeah. Well, one of the signs of a good show, in my opinion, is when you get your audience kind of yelling back at you over the radio or the iPhone or whatever it is that they're listening to it on. And that's what you guys did to me last week. And folks, at this point, you may want to either make a note. I'll have a link, of course, in the show notes, or pause this and go listen to the August 13th edition of the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast. These two and Kelly started talking about tech in science fiction, or I guess, kind of how we got to hear what, John, I think you were the one that said, what we expected versus what we got.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of interesting points brought up in that I sort of wanted to dig a little bit deeper on, and I had my own reactions, and, maybe you all can dig deeper into some of your reactions. And of course, naturally, we go back to what seems to be the origin of all tech things for the modern day, and that's Star Trek. And how it seems to have affected, I guess, our expectations and in a lot of ways what we got. So that's where I'd like to start. And John, I think you were the one that made the point, and it was a really interesting one that I hadn't thought about. In those days, everything was sort of mechanical. The real world was mechanical. Electronics were just starting to come in, and so the blinking lights and the buttons and all were sort of a new thing. And today, it seems in some ways sort of quaint to think of things as mechanical when so many things were electronic.
Yeah, it's kind of reversed. The thing that was easy to do was to hire a actress, somebody like, Majel Barrett, Ron Berry, and have her rehearse her lines and then talk back to the crew as if it were an intelligent computer. That was easy to do, and that was the holy grail. And you're right, the Star Trek bridge had lots of buttons, less so in the next generation where things were more touchscreen. But as time has gone along, the movement of electrons and touchscreen displays came along nicely. I was looking at Aviation Week a while back, and I saw the inside of the new Orion spacecraft, and there were some pictures comparing it to the old Apollo, which was like a gazillion little dials and buttons and levers and instruments, and now they've got 3 flat screen displays that you touch. What we didn't do so well on, I think, is a consumer-oriented, Siri notwithstanding, is a consumer-oriented intelligent agent that lives inside our Mac. And what got me thinking about that is an article I did a while back with a theoretical astrophysicist, Dr. Gaurav Khanna at the University of Massachusetts, where we were focusing on supercomputing, and that a Mac Pro with Fire-Core 700s can achieve a theoretical max of 7 teraflops or more with OpenCL parallel processing. So I'm thinking, all right, we've got a supercomputer by just a few years old standards sitting on our desktop. Why can't my Mac Pro have an intelligent agent that does things that are useful, sort of munge around in my computer, figure out what's going on, look for problems, diagnose my flash drive, look for impending problems, carry on a conversation with me, have the wisdom to know when not to talk and the wisdom when to speak up and say things like, I've been looking at your system, and here are some things I'm going to attend to and take care of for you, and here's some things I think you should know about and you may want to take care of. And is there anything else I can do for you? That kind of intelligent agent has been the holy grail for a long, long time. We're nibbling at the edges of it with Cortana and Siri, but still it's basically a parsing engine that can figure out where to go on the internet, whereas it's not really a very intuitive and very semi-conscious, alert AI agent that I can have a conversation with. I don't care if it's the conversation level of a 10-year-old. I can carry on a conversation with a 10-year-old. I want it to be smart enough to do something useful for me, and that holy grail is something that we thought we would have. We got our flat screens. That was the holy grail for television. And we're starting to get there with Siri, but I'm just disappointed we haven't made better progress.
Jeff, I think you were the one too that brought up the old Apple Knowledge Navigator video from.
No, that was me.
That was you. Okay, somebody did.
Go ahead, Jeff.
and I went back and watched that too as a result, and I thought a lot about what John was saying, and I'm not sure, but I think that little guy could really get annoying if you weren't careful with him.
Well, keep in mind the time frame when the Knowledge Navigator concept video was made. And at that point, the ideas about how we can and could interact with computers was very different than what it is now. And so I think that the idea of Knowledge Navigator still holds up, but I think the way it will interact with us eventually will be much different than what we have there. So the scenario I have is I walk into my office in the morning and my iPad is sitting on my desk, and I say, "Hi Siri, what's going on today?" And Siri comes back and says, "Good morning, Jeff. I performed some routine maintenance on your computer last night to avoid potential hard drive corruption. You have 3 appointments. One of them is with John Martellaro, and I scheduled a lunch meeting for you based on an email that came in last night. That's going to be at 2:00. Don't worry, I've already arranged for the Uber car to come and pick you up. Is there anything I need to take care of before you start your day?"
That's it.
That's it. And then I can say, "Sure, Siri, send a message back to John telling him thank you for coordinating the meeting, and let me know if I get any calls from Bill today, but don't put anything through because I'm going to be really focused." "Okay, Jeff, no problem. Have a great day." And then I start my day, and that's it. And if there's something that's really important, like I said, tell me if Bill is calling, then Siri can interrupt me when she knows it's appropriate and say, "Excuse me, Bill called about 5 minutes ago. I left him a message so that he knows that you're busy and you'll get back to him after your schedule frees up this evening." "Okay, thanks, Siri." And then later on this evening, Siri's like, "I see that things seem to have calmed down for you. Would you like me to call Bill?" "Yes, thank you." And so it's not like Knowledge
Jeff,
Navigator.
What you've described there, Jeff, is sort of, in my mind, a IBM Watson level of intelligence that goes far beyond parsing English. It has to be combined with some sort of engine that puts together a very good understanding of human nuances of speech and can translate that into organization and activities.
Yes, and I believe that's where the people at Viv Labs are headed, and that was started by some of the guys that came from Siri, and they left Apple and started this company because they had a vision of what they wanted Siri to be, and it's not the same vision that Apple has for what Siri is, at least not today. So they've started Viv, and their idea is that it's a true AI where it will learn over time, not based just on you, but on what everyone else is doing, and then it can get to the point where it can better anticipate your specific needs and handle tasks for you without needing direct intervention or very specific commands like we have to give to Siri today.
It does bring up some interesting questions, like maybe Apple's vision is different because they're focused on privacy, and then you get the issue of if an intelligent agent becomes almost conscious and starts to have a personality and will of its own, then what happens when you wipe your flash drive? You start getting
did you just kill your AI?
Yeah, right. Or do you want to sometimes?
Yeah. Well, in a case like that, I would imagine that our AIs would be, while they're contained within our systems, they would also be living outside our systems. So in the event we have to wipe our computer, we're not killing our AI. It's just our AI might temporarily be limited to accessing us through our iPhone or something, and then when our computer's reformatted and up and running again, then one of the first things we hear is our AI chiming in and saying, "Hi, Jeff, it's great to be back on your desktop too."
Well, one of the channels or avenues for that, in my mind, is in the future. I don't expect to have a black cylinder sitting on my desktop. I expect that intelligence to be encapsulated in a robot. And the robot does all of that front work for me, so I don't have to worry about a display. But the robot can throw up a holographic display if I need to look at something, but I don't expect to be sitting at a keyboard for much longer and looking at a liquid crystal display. I expect to be, or I hope to be, talking to a robot. And then the robot has that persona where we don't think about running a robot through a trash compactor. If we get angry at it, we might return it to the factory for an update. But it becomes our physical manifestation of the intelligent agent. That's the way I see things going. And before that can happen, I think we have to have enough intelligence in our computers to reach a certain level where you can make that jump over to a robot. It doesn't make any sense to have robots until our computers have enough intelligence and consciousness that they can merit, moving into the robotic mode.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. For some time now, I've been telling you about Text Expander and how I'm always referring to it as my most used utility, often getting invoked across multiple applications many times every hour that I'm at my Mac. But how do you get started with Text Expander? Well, you start with simple things and get a feel for how Text Expander works and go from there. For example, how many times do you type the informal version of your name? Right now, right this second, go to Text Expander and create a new snippet that holds the text of your name with an abbreviation that starts with the letter X and ends with your 2-letter initials. Boom. You've just created your first snippet. Now, do the same for the formal version of your name. That might include your middle initial, or your full middle name, or part of a maiden name, or whatever. Set the abbreviation to start with X again, and then your 3-letter initials. You've just created your second snippet. Both are useful in different situations, and both will save you time. Sure, not a lot of time, but it all mounts up. And now you know how to create a snippet, and you're on your way to embracing the power of Text Expander. As you use your new snippets, think about all the other pieces of text that you regularly and repeatedly type. Make snippets of those, watch your Text Expander library grow and grow, and your productivity right along with it. You can get Text Expander for Mac in the App Store, or visit smilesoftware.com to pick up a free trial and buy direct. I think you'll find the Text Expander will quickly become an indispensable tool. Text Expander from Smile, the makers of world-class software. Thanks to Smile for their ongoing support of MacVoices. There are so many points there. One thing I was surprised you didn't bring up in the show when you were talking about this, it was HAL 9000 from 2001. Because that's another, if you go back and watch the movie and really think about it, I mean, some of those conversations, and again, I know we're debating science fiction here, but it's a good precursor for some of this. Some of those conversations got a little tedious because of the exact nature that computer seemed to require, not unlike maybe what Siri has to have, and Siri's obviously a little more rigid, but you have to say certain commands certain ways before she will recognize you, he will recognize you, whatever. And so I'm wondering how realistic it is. And to the conversation point, John, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure I want to have a conversation. I'm not sure I'm not a little more comfortable, even though it's not as convenient, with telling Siri what I want and then having her go do it.
Well, the way I think about it is the robot science, state-of-the-art technology. There's a very conscious, well thought out design for robots. Good robots are designed to be a little smaller, 4.5 feet, not physically intimidating. You wouldn't want to have a 7-foot robot in your house. You'd feel physically threatened if something went wrong. You want a robot to be about 4.5 feet tall, to weigh about 80 pounds, to have big eyes, to have a innocent, friendly expression on its face. You want it to look like a kitten. You want to have big eyes and a friendly face and something that you can relate to. I see the same thing, the same technology occurring with how an artificial intelligence interacts with humans. There has to be that wisdom. We're very immature. We think of Star Trek and we think of HAL, and we have to be very astute about the psychology of human beings, when we want to be interrupted and when we don't, how the AI couches its terms. You don't want the AI agent saying there, well, if you'd only done this, you dummy, things wouldn't have gone sour with your Mac. There has to be that psychological tuning, I think, before we can make the next step.
Well, okay. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're looking at the sci-fi promises we were made and how they have played out for us is that a lot of these promises were made with or based on the perception that people had about technology at the time. So, like in the classic Star Trek series, when Major Barrett rolls off a "Work, gang," you hear the mechanical clicking of a punch card machine in the background.
Great point.
And with HAL 9000, the interaction with the computer was based on how we perceived computer interaction at that time. So there was monotony, and there was this precision that had to be there with interacting with HAL, because that was the best that we could come up with. Things have evolved, and look at Mother from Alien, which was clearly an artificial intelligence. But the way they interacted with that was they actually had to go into a specially constructed chamber where they would talk to Mother, and then Mother would interact back with them on what seemed like a more personal level. But every other interaction they would have with Mother was not something where they were talking directly to the computer. It was based on the things that they were doing as they interacted with the control panels and other instruments that they had on the spaceship.
Well, the way I think about that is theatrical values. You can have an explosion in space, and we know that there's no air to transmit the sound. But people in the audience don't like silence on the big screen when something is lit up. They want to hear the explosion.
Sure.
So we simulate that. And I think we've simulated, like the example you gave with the clicking in the background. We have to telegraph cues to the non-technical audience and sort of help them. And so I think part of that is theatrical values as opposed to very technical predictions of the future. I think the movie Her that I saw recently as a good example of the way I would expect a modern computer to talk to you. Never mind whether it's Scarlett Johansson appearing on the screen or not. The dialogue that went on in that movie sets a good standard for how we want to talk to our operating system.
I guess the question comes up: do we want to talk to our operating systems?
I do. I want to have an intelligent conversation, because right now I have to be a detective. I have to probe, and I have to have tools, and I have to check things out, and I have to run applications. I have to look at things like Smart Reporter and other tools to kind of constantly being in a maintenance mode and looking for problems before they happen. I want my computer to do that. I mean, you think about the Mac operating system. It's very sophisticated. It's got millions of lines of code. It does all sorts of things. But when something goes wrong, when an XML file gets corrupted, you're hosed. There's nothing you can do. And things go sour from there.
Yeah, you got me with that one, John. The idea that we should build more intelligence into the maintenance part of the computers. And I don't know, I really am not quite sure why, because that one does seem to be, what's the difference between the OS running disk first aid, or disk first aid, on my drive versus me running it manually? Now, I know that there are maintenance scripts and everything that execute in the background overnight, and we tell folks, leave your computers on, for good reasons. But you're right, there are a lot of things that it could be doing. The question I guess I have is, do you need, or would you find it an enhanced experience to be talking to it about what it's doing?
Well, I just see it as another level of software abstraction. We started off writing ones and zeros, and then the IBM programmers in the 50s got smart and they figured out how to build an assembler, writing an assembler in machine language so that they could use 3-digit codes. And then we were able to use the assemblers to build Fortran compilers. And then Fortran compilers moved on. And then we had Java, and we had objects, and we had ever escalating levels of abstraction, so that now in the Swift programming language, programmers can do in a couple lines of code what it took dozens of lines of code before. And so I see voice input is just another layer of power and abstraction to get the computer to do things more quickly so we can attend to things more creative.
On the communication thing, I see the way we communicate with our computers and our computers communicating with us changing in a very dramatic way, where it's not so much the constant back and forth talking, but something where the computers will begin to anticipate what it is we're going to say, and we'll be able to a degree know what we're going to say, because they will be paying attention to more than just our spoken word. They will pay attention to our body language and the reflexive actions, that the unconscious actions that our bodies undergo when we are feeling certain ways or we're going to say a certain type of thing. So the computers will be paying attention to how our eyes dilate, how our respiration changes. Are we starting to sweat more? Is our body temperature changing? How are we holding our face? What is our posture? And then based on that, the computer will have a much better idea what we're going to say. And in many cases, will know what the concept will be before we even open our mouths. They can proactively respond to us as opposed to reactively respond. And in many cases, that will eliminate the need to actually talk. And only when it's truly necessary will the computer respond back. And I think the whole idea of robots is totally going to play in to that too. But I think that the robot component that we interact with will be an avatar in essence. So it will be an avatar device, and it could look like R2D2 or C3PO or
you mean on our computer screens?
No, it'll be a physical avatar, and our surroundings will be the robot as well. So we'll have robotic components built into all parts of our homes and into our cars. And when we need to have a physical interaction with a part of that system, then the avatar device, the
ghost in the wires.
Yeah, then that physical device will, R2D2 will roll up to us, or C3PO will come out and interact with us. And if we need to take part of that system with us when we leave, and it needs to be more than just the interaction through our iPhone 23, then the avatar has the ability to physically leave the premises with us, and off we go to the store.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's cool.
Jeff, give me an idea of what you have in mind for the physical interaction. When you said the robot would be around us, that I can see. Sorry, folks, we're just going to go back to Star Trek again. But the ever-present computer that's just waiting for somebody to say "computer," and it'll respond. I'm trying to visualize what kind of physical things that I would need to interact with a robot for.
Oh, I have good ideas on that. I want a robot that can do the dishes. I want a robot that can vacuum the carpet.
Well, wait. But that's a whole different matter, John. And I agree with you.
That's different from the avatar. I like
your idea on the avatar.
Yeah, and what's
a holographic display that occurs that does a specific task. Is that what you?
Oh no, this avatar is going to be a physical device.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about you got me thinking about little holographic images that pop up and do particular maintenance tasks or something.
Hey, this is all our imagination. We can totally have the holographic version also. But the idea that I'm having for the physical avatar would be, say you have, say I went hiking and I fell off a waterfall. By the way, this actually did happen at one point, but I was able to still function after that. But let's say I had broken my leg, and so I needed help performing routine tasks around my house. My avatar can now help me stand up, make sure that I'm getting in and out of bed safely. It can it can perform those tasks that I would otherwise do myself, like I went to make the bed. Great. It will make the bed for me. I need to go grocery shopping. I can either have my avatar go with me, or I will send it to the store to pick things up that aren't going to be delivered. And maybe I'm going to some event, like a trade show or conference, where I need to have a physical personal assistant with me handling things.
You have to buy an airline ticket seat for them?
No. No. I rent.
That's going to cut the airline's capacity in half, because for every adult seat,
there'll be an avatar.
It's going to have an avatar, and it's going to cost twice as much for half the passenger.
No, what I do when I get to the location is I go to the avatar store, and I rent an avatar for the week, and then my AI remotely takes control of that avatar, and so I don't have to physically travel with it unless I really, really want to. But I can pick up a temporary physical avatar that my AI takes over, and now while I'm at this event, it's doing all of whatever those tasks are that I need to have a physical presence to handle.
It's just sitting there on the tray table until the guy next to you gets irritated and goes whack.
Yeah, and then our avatars fight, and next thing we have these awesome robot wars.
Robot wars, yeah.
May the best robot win, yes.
Okay, now I find myself in the very uncomfortable, unusual position of curmudgeon here, or I don't mind. I never mind playing devil's advocate, but curmudgeon's a different matter. But Jeff, some of the things you're describing will send the privacy people just out of their minds.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the things that the information you would have to reveal about yourself and store somewhere, to go a little farther back in the conversation, to decide that I want to schedule lunch with Bill, but John is more important. So if John calls for lunch, then I need to reschedule or cancel, the lunch with Bill. And which restaurants do I prefer? And I mean, there's so many things there. There's so much opportunity for abuse. I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be done or couldn't be done. There's that, and then there's the practical matter of just feeding all that information in, or using something long enough for it to figure out that John is more important than Bill.
Well, the avatar will have to be mechanically trained in the skills of martial arts, because you don't want your avatar kidnapped and held for ransom, right?
Lasers, Jeff. Good.
Self-defense.
Well,
right.
if your avatar is stolen, then it just shuts off, and that's it.
Yeah. You can just remotely shut it off and move its consciousness to somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. So the avatar is nothing more than a husk that animates when our AIs take control over it.
Right.
Yeah. But as far as the privacy issue goes, I'm totally with you, Chuck. The notion of that much about us being stored in computer systems that can potentially be hacked is freaky, like totally freaky. And yet, when I'm talking about these things, I'm sure it's pretty obvious just how excited I get about the potential.
Well, that's why it has to be conscious enough to know what it is and what it has at its disposal, and intelligent enough to know how to stay out of trouble and be responsible for the information that it has. If it's just a device that looks like it's intelligent, then it's helpless, because it doesn't know how to protect itself and protect that information.
And one thing in the science fiction, at least that we're referring to, I mean, their novels have gone a lot deeper, but the social part is what I think we've missed along the way in so many of these things, and the social aspects of this. I mean, if my avatar goes crazy, or if someone hacks my avatar, suddenly it's making dates for me, it's making lunch meetings, it's booking tickets, it's doing all kind of things.
Might commit a murder, and then you have to have a CSI analysis.
Yeah, I mean, John, I guess that's a real extreme, but I could see it, doing a lot more damage. And here we are in an age where the posting of a Facebook photo with you wearing a lampshade at the Christmas party is, a big deal.
I thought I deleted that one.
No, I put it back up, John.
Okay.
It was a really nice lampshade.
With friends like you, Jeff. But, you know, I mean, think about that, and then think about now what we're talking about an avatar, potentially giving the avatar an opportunity to do. And it just...
Well,
it's scary.
Jeff and I were talking this. Jeff and I were talking this morning about how scary it is to think about some of the things that we do today about, you know, thermostats and iPhones with their gyroscopes spying on us and updating the firmware on your pen, and, you know, the things that we go through today would just shock people from, you know, 50 years ago. So I think as time goes on, you know, the community develops together, and we kind of march along in the pace of technology, and we figure out how to deal with these things. Don't you think?
Yes, and we will have issues along the way where stuff happens that totally freaks people out, but the technology will continue to move forward. And
always something for me to write about.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the services like Facebook are in some way conditioning us for that future, where we feel more comfortable with very personal information being stored on servers that may or may not be in our control, and that information may or may not be used in a way that is limited just to our own personal good and personal needs. Like you know, Facebook, they're selling us, and if that was that big of a deal for people, Facebook wouldn't have made it.
Right.
Jeff, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The idea, and the younger generations are sharing more of themselves than we would ever have shared at their age, just because that's the way, that's the environment they're growing up in. That's what they're comfortable with. You know, you and I look at it and say, gee, not so sure how that's going to affect you in later life. What we forget is that in later life, everybody around them is going to have those same values and those same norms.
Right.
It's going to be completely different. And we're suddenly going to be the old codgers who are saying, you know, boy, we would never have done that. Well, I just did, actually. Darn, I just aged myself.
Chuck, just as hackers figured out how to access the vibrational frequencies of the gyroscope in your Android phone as it picks up acoustical information, you know, and eavesdrop on a voice conversation, the expanding relaxation of privacy just creates a myriad of new methods for the black hats to steal things and make a living. And so we have to constantly elevate our technology and fight back with that. So there may be a change in attitude, but there's ever increasing threats too that people have to be aware of. It's part of an educational process.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. We all know that Take Control books are a great value, right? For only a few dollars, you get some of the best people in the business to teach you how to get the most out of applications, educate you on some of the bigger picture tech issues, and guide you to safety in the treacherous waters of today's privacy environment. But what if I told you that you could add to your Take Control collection for half price? You would jump at the chance, wouldn't you? Well, now's the time. This week only, Take Control is having a 50% off sale on all of their titles. Not just one or two titles, not just a few new titles or some legacy titles, all of them. That means that this is the time to stock up and get yourself trained on everything from Wi-Fi networks to podcasting, Macintosh automation to PDF pen, and of course, our ever-present topic, backups. Don't wait, because this sale doesn't come around often and it doesn't last long. Go to TakeControlBooks.com before August 25th and take advantage of their back-to-school sale, even if you're not going back to school. That's 50% off every Take Control book in their ever-expanding library. And if you're hearing this after the 25th, Take Control books are still a bargain at their regular price. Or maybe pick up a bundle. No matter how you get them, Take Control books are a great way to learn more about what you want to learn about. Take Control Books at TakeControlBooks.com. The answers you need now from leading experts. There's one other thing I wanted to make sure I got to, and I was hoping Kelly might get here, but I guess App Camp for Girls is running long and hard. But the idea that, and I realize it's a plot device in all of the science fiction shows, but the communications devices that you know, the comm badges and I think they called them the Link on Babylon 5 that were stuck in the back of their hands.
Right here.
You got your comm badge right there.
Yeah, right there.
The comm lock from Space 1999.
The comm lock from Space 1999. We can go the little earpiece thing that they used in Fringe. Those are all interesting, but for the most part, those are all devices that everybody around you would hear the conversation. And it's a plot device, and it's great in science fiction. I'm trying to figure out why there's this big backlash against Bluetooth earpieces that they look dorky and people kind of point and snicker, but nobody points and snickers when people have like I do right now, 2 earphones in, blocking out the rest of the world.
Well, Chuck,
and a wire.
Keep in mind that what we have happening right now is from the perspective of the people that are watching the show right now, a more intimate setting. For all they know, we happen to be sitting in the same studio, and there's just like a pane of glass between all of us, or maybe even not that. And it just so happens that we've decorated each wall so it's a little bit different to give the illusion of being in different spaces. Having our earphones in and which are pretty much not even noticeable, If someone wants to see my earphones, I'm going to have to turn my head to the side. And for you, Chuck, it's pretty much the same thing. And John, with your black chair, I have to look really close to see that those wires are there. So we've created this illusion that we are in a more intimate setting talking. And that goes along with how people are perceiving this setup right now. So that's more acceptable. When we're in public, we've now taken away that illusion, and now it's just someone standing there talking to apparently no one. And we have the stigma going back for a long time about people that are standing around talking to no one are crazy.
Well, that stigma that may still be an accurate perception, Jeff, but I guess
based on some of the conversations I hear,
yeah. I guess it really surprises me because I know I have a Bluetooth earpiece. I use it in the car all the time, but I'm not above it being still in my ear. I get out, go into the grocery store. I'm still listening to a podcast. I'm not even talking to anybody. I'm just listening to something I want to listen to, whether it's music or whatever. The fidelity is not there for music, but bottom line is I'm kind of partially in my own little world, absorbing information, doing something I need to do at that time, using up that time, and yet once in a while you'll catch somebody kind of looking at you strangely because you have this thing hanging out of your ear, yet they seem to think nothing of the fact that, Jeff, you're wearing your earbuds with the cord down, very visible. They walk right by those people, and I can't figure that out.
I think one of the reasons is that people get annoyed when you're presumptuous enough to surface your vocal space to them. So before, you were talking on the phone, you only heard one side of the conversation, or you're carrying on a discussion in the grocery store with the grocer and you're saying, I can't find where the organic pears are or something like that. That's a long-standing social norm. But when somebody's carrying on a conversation with someone else, I think there's and sort of infringing on your personal space with their public voice, that it sort of feels perhaps kind of geeky, sort of Google Glass, geeky and unsociable. And it also makes you feel kind of creepy that somebody else is making you listen to their interesting conversation. And I think it just annoys people.
Well, there's a difference between, say, for the people that are watching the show right now, or since there's also an audio version that goes out, listening as they're walking around the grocery store, they have chosen to invite us in to their world by listening or watching the show. So they're getting to be a part of our intimate conversation, and that's okay because they have approved of this interaction. When someone is standing in the grocery store talking to the air, apparently, but actually yelling into their Bluetooth earpiece about how pissed off they are that Bill didn't pick up the bill for dinner last night, and they had to go Dutch, and he's just a jerk, just like he's been every other time, and I'm going to dump him again. We have not been given the opportunity to choose to participate in that interaction. It has been thrust upon us.
Right.
And that is something that we typically don't go for.
But Jeff,
I agree.
I'm thrust into other people's conversations every time they pick this up, and they're walking around the grocery store with it, and half the time they're yelling more than anybody with an earpiece.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for my earpiece. It's here somewhere.
And it's just as offensive as if they had the earpiece. It doesn't matter if the earpiece is there or if it's a phone stuck up to your head. It's really about whether or not the choice to be part of that interaction has been taken away from us, I think.
Yeah, you nailed it, Jeff.
Okay. All right. Again, I guess I'm focusing a little more on sometimes the reactions I'll get if I'm wearing my earpiece. Not having a conversation. Don't even have to be listening to anything. It's just there in case the phone rings. And if the phone rings, only I'm going to hear it because it's only going to be in my ear. They're not going to hear my phone ring. And I'm going to hopefully be as respectful as I possibly can be of the people around me if I need to have that conversation, or I'm going to go, get away from them and hide in a corner somewhere. Because I don't want people overhearing my conversation.
And you're considerate. Most people aren't, or at least a lot of people aren't.
Perhaps. So let's wrap this up with: are we asking too much? Are we not asking enough of our devices and the operating systems at this point?
We need to ask too much. We always need to ask too much, because if we don't, we're not going to be pushing that technology forward, and we'll become complacent with whatever it is we have. Remember, it's Bill Gates that said there's no reason why we would ever need to have more than 640K in a computer. And had we listened to that, just think of what the technology would be today. But people want more. We demand more. We expect more. And I think that's a really good thing, because when we do that, then we move beyond what we had into something that at first may not work as well as we want, but it evolves and becomes better. And the next thing you know, we're walking around with iPads and iPhones, and even that technology we are still demanding more out of. And so eventually we will get more.
I think there's always an economic aspect to it. You've got universities doing wonderful research on intelligent agents, but they don't have a way to commercialize the product. And then you've got competitive computer companies who have their own agenda and are not willing to spend a lot of time and money in a university fashion, because that would require Apple, for example, to hire a whole bunch of PhDs and virtually set up a university just to achieve this one holy grail goal. And then it may not match Apple's needs and technology agenda and what they think is commercially viable and so on. So there's, in my mind, sort of a disconnect there. But time heals all, and time takes care of that. And when the Viv people are going off with their vision and doing something, if they do something dramatic, Apple might want to bring them back into the fold. Or if the technology has a breakthrough and Apple can do it commercially and acceptably and fits in with their product plans, then we'll see it. But sometimes I think there's always a little bit of agenda going on, and that's why we see certain things right away and certain things kind of lag.
One thing's for sure: it's whatever's coming is going to come, whether in the big leaps that Jeff is talking about, or maybe the more practical leaps that John's talking about. It's going to come. Hopefully it won't be to the detriment of all of us.
Hey, we're all still alive and having fun and writing and exploring our technology. It's a great time. Yeah. It's a great time to be alive.
If Sarah Connor starts running around and she's really freaking out, it's probably okay for us to freak out too. But until then, let's I say let's roll with it and see where this technology takes us.
Absolutely. It's a ride.
Jeff, that's a great way to wrap it up. Think of where it's already taken us. Think about, not 15 years ago what the state of technology is, and it's, by today's standards, it's almost laughable. You go back a little farther and you have to wonder how we all ever got anything done.
Or how we managed to get to the moon with computers that couldn't even compete with wristwatches that we have today.
Yeah.
What I love is my iPad. There's this little window into the universe. You sit there with this 10-inch screen, and there's a million websites with a billion pages, and I can sit there and I can go to BBC or some other website in Sweden or Texas, and I can roam the surface of the earth on all these different websites and all this activity and the social networks and everything right there on this one device in your lap. That's just an amazing thing to happen.
And the social changes that it's going to bring. I mean, it's one thing to do the technical stuff. It's the social changes I think they're going to be equally interesting and maybe even a little more scary as some people adopt, some people resist. I'm sorry, I don't remember who said Google Glass, but I wanted to get that into the conversation too. Because
that was John.
Okay, John, I mean, there's a piece of technology that has been almost roundly thrashed upon, and yet it seems to be such a logical thing. But we have privacy advocates, you have people for a dozen different reasons hating Google Glass. You had a bar that banned Google Glass.
Right.
You had states banning Google Glass for driving. I mean, in some ways, it was just sort of amazing to see that backlash reaction.
Well, I think that's an example of Google's approach. I've written about this, where if you can do it with technology, just go ahead and do it and see what sticks. And there was a time when Google Glass first came out where a few writers were saying, oh my God, Apple's doomed. Look at what Google's doing. If Apple doesn't do its own version of Glass, it'll never catch up, and Google will destroy Apple because that's the future. And look how that turned out. So Apple's pretty good about understanding our social interaction with our hardware and how hardware and technology should serve us. And Apple takes its time and thinks about things like they're doing presumably right now with the iWatch. But I think, like you, Chuck, I agree. The Google Glass is such a great idea. And I think the big part of the problem has to do with its obnoxious physical presence and a reminder to us, though, what's going on. When Google Glass is a contact lens, and you have a device in your ear that's the processor and the audio, and nobody can tell you're wearing contact lenses, the whole problem's going to go away, and we'll just get on with the technology and use it as it was intended. But right now, it's sort of a stick in the eye, isn't it? Somebody walks into it. It's like a joke. Somebody walks into a bar with Google Glass.
Yeah. Well,
right? Gets thrown out,
Or when it becomes a contact lens, everybody's going to get really paranoid about the whole situation. So,
well, they will. But when we get new technology that has big social implications, then people get really nervous and they really freak out, and the technology evolves. And then people don't freak out anymore. And eventually it gets to the point where they expect it. And there was a time when the idea of a camera on your smartphone was really disconcerting to a lot of people, because now anyone can just take your photograph anytime. But look at where we are. If your phone doesn't have a camera on it, people look at you like you're a fool and you just got ripped off.
Yeah.
You got a Gibbs phone.
That's a great point, Joe. That's a great point.
Gibbs's phone, the running joke on NCIS.
Oh, and I mean, sure, there are people that take advantage of things. They take photos in the locker rooms of health clubs or whatever when they shouldn't. But for the most part, those boundaries have been respected. I think casually, and so you're right. There is an evolution there that happens. I don't know. We have to revisit this topic more because this is a fascinating discussion. Folks, I know it's not our usual fare here on MacVoices, but hopefully we've stretched your mind a little bit and made you think about some things that you normally think about. Jeff, thanks so much. It's great to see you.
It's always great to see you. Thank you for having me on. I love doing this.
Well, we got to do it more. That's all there is to it.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah, next time we'll get Kelly in here.
Definitely. John, thank you. We really appreciate it, and I love what you do at the Mac Observer, where you definitely stretch our minds by looking beyond just the Apple and Mac stuff and push that into a larger world. So keep it up.
I will. Thank you.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. This is a fun MacVoices tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Check our show notes for the bios for these two gentlemen and find out where they are, and definitely check out the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast. I think you'll add it to your daily listening too. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.